Good morning, intersection. Okay, I did not know that. Yo, thank you. I didn't know that the verse I'm supposed to read would be on here, so that makes it easier. I'm Rylan, for those of you that don't know me. I went here for about 4 years, and then I'm going to college now to study theology. And it's good to see all of you guys. So the passage I'm reading from is John 14, verses 4 through 9, where Jesus says, "And you know the way to where I am going." And Thomas said to him, "Lord, we do not know where you are going. How can we know the way?" Jesus said to him, "I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you had known me, you would have known my Father also. From now on, you do know him and have seen him." Philip said to him, "Lord, show us the Father, and it is enough for us." Jesus said to him, "Have I been with you so long, and you still do not know me, Philip? Whoever has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, 'Show us the Father'?" Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Rylan. Well, again, good morning. My name is Isaac. I'm the lead pastor here at the Intersection Church. Just a joy to see you all. It's a beautiful, beautiful day. A couple things as we get started. Last week, we had a bake sale in the lobby for a fundraiser for the youth group. You guys, amazing. I'm sure the treats were delicious. Thank you for bringing it in. We raised over $1,100. You guys, your generosity and your kindness, we continue to invest in the next generation, which is part of what we do here at the Intersection Church. And you guys are just incredible. So thank you so much for your kindness and generosity. And also, if you happen to bring a Tupperware dish as a part of that, you can see me or Kim or Nick or Landon, and we'll be happy to get your dishes back to you. So thank you again. Just remarkable. What a great church we're a part of here. Also, today is, I mentioned earlier that Pentecost Sunday is today. It's also here in America Memorial Day weekend. We are blessed. We live in a great, great nation. And I was thinking, we are free because other people laid down their life. We have freedom, and freedom isn't always free. And so we know that we are here because people laid down their life for our sake, which is what Jesus did for us. And he said, true love is this, to lay down one's life for a friend. And so we're grateful for Memorial Day. As you're celebrating and having a great weekend and you're enjoying the sun, be grateful for what God has done in our life. And we are blessed because so many people gave their lives. And so we're grateful for that. Okay. Nearly 20 years ago or so, I've almost been here 20 years, there was a wonderful woman at the time named Phyllis Forrester. She was one of the elderly ladies here at the church. Just a wonderful, godly woman. She loved us, loved God, just an incredible lady. And on this particular Sunday morning, she was in the center, and I was, as I do, running by, trying to get stuff done, and she stopped, and we chatted for a few minutes. And it was one of those days, I don't know if you've ever had this. It was a Sunday morning, and Katie and I weren't seeing eye to eye this particular morning. I know it's rare. It's rare. It happens. You've probably seen it in your own life. A Sunday morning just kind of happens on those days. And I was running by, and Phyllis just started talking to me, and her comment came out of the blue. What struck me was what she said to me was not in context of our conversation. I wasn't saying, "Boy, Katie is killing me." I wasn't doing that. There was none of that stuff. But she said, just out of the blue, she said something, and she spoke right to me. You know, you have a conversation, but then you have times where somebody spoke right to you. And that's what she said that to me this morning. She said, "You know, Isaac, I just think the Lord is blessed when we apologize first." And I went, Phyllis. And I knew, even though she had no idea what was going on, I knew she was talking to me. And I knew that God was talking to me. And so I finished whatever I was doing on that particular morning, and I went back to my office, and I had to make a phone call. And I called Katie, and I apologized and worked through whatever we were having on that day. It was just a humble conversation. But what Phyllis pointed me towards in that moment was several things. First, we want to be people who put relationship first rather than being right. I probably was wrong, but in that moment before Phyllis, I was pretty sure I was right. And what Phyllis reminded me is, You can be right and you can be lonely. You know, we want to put relationship first, and so do your part to make sure that we are in right relationship. And so she reminded me of that. The other thing she pointed me towards, though, is that expressing my own weakness and fears and failures to others is a necessary part of relationship. I had likely erred, and I needed to admit it. I needed to admit my own problem in whatever we were dealing with. You know how it is, I don't even remember what it was 20 years ago. I needed to express where I had failed. And what happens is, when we express where we fail, the interesting thing is, the other person doesn't say, "You're the worst, get away from me." When we say, "Hey, I messed up, this is what I did," what happens is it actually opens the door for relationship. We are able to, in those moments, reconcile. We're actually able to, when we acknowledge our mistake, our sin, our weakness, whatever that situation is, we open the possibility to relationship again. See, it's interesting that in our troubled times, when there's trouble, our tendency, as I said a few weeks ago, is to rise up in pretense and power and think, "I'm going to dominate in pride," or we shrink in protection. So it's either pretense and power or protection. And what happens is we do that because we want to cover up our vulnerabilities. We think if we dominate, we hide our weaknesses, or if we shrink, we protect our weaknesses. That's what we're trying to do is we are trying to cover up our vulnerabilities. We will experience trouble. We will experience times of difficulty. We will experience times of pain and agitation. We're working through John 14 where Jesus said, "Let not your hearts be troubled." And that word troubled is the Greek word tarasso, which means to agitate, to stir up, to be disturbed. It's like, the idea behind it is if you had a water and you stirred it up and the sediments kind of begin to take over, and the water gets murky as all of the muck and mire underneath the water at the bottom begins to rise because it's agitated. It begins to be disturbed. And now the water is now murky. And just like the water can get murky, our souls, when we get agitated, disturbed, terrassoed, our souls become murky. It just becomes dark. We can have our agitation in our soul. And Jesus tells us that when the world around us is agitated and stirred up and murky, terrassoed, we do not have to live that way. We can be still. When the world around us is stirred up and agitated, we can be at rest. We can be at peace. Our soul can be at peace. How can this be? Well, John tells us in John 14 is where we've been. And last week, Josh Johnson spoke, and if you were here, you may want to go back and hear it again. If you weren't here, you need to go back and again. I don't know how he took Taylor Swift and a psychiatrist named Jean Piaget, in one sentence tied them together. I went, whoa, this guy is good. He is... I don't know. He did it, and I went, that is good public speaking. I got to talk to this man. It was just a great message. So go back and listen to it. But we're working through how to have and he talked about having certainty in uncertain times. And we're kind of still in that progress. We're working through John 14. And Rylan read for us just a moment ago. Jesus said, "If you had known me, you would have known my Father also. For now on, you do know him, and you have seen him." So as Jesus begins to push us towards this idea of having an untroubled heart, an unagitated heart in a troubled world, the central focus continues to be on relationship to him, on knowing Jesus. He said, "If you had known me, you would have known the Father. From now on, you do know him." The idea is that we can know God. Knowledge is the critical piece to have an unagitated heart in an agitated and troubled world. Or if we want to have an untroubled heart in a troubled world, the critical piece is knowing Christ. He says 3 times, if you had known me, you'd know the Father, and you can now know me going forward. What is going on with this word know? This word, we talk about it quite a bit. The disciples had to be very confused. Can you imagine? You just spent 3 years camping out, eating every meal, sleepless nights under the stars, seeing all these things. These guys had walked with Jesus for 3 years, and Jesus says, "You don't know me." I think we do, Jesus. I think we know each other. And Jesus says, "If you would have known me." The disciples have to be confused. They were close friends, and yet Jesus says, "You don't know me." The disciples are unable to put together that Jesus and the Father are connected. They're connected. They didn't know that Jesus reveals the Father. If you want to know what God looks like, Jesus says, "Look at me. I am what the Father looks like. I'm doing the will of the Father." If we want to know God, we know Jesus. What's interesting here is Jesus is expressing a desire here. He wants his followers, his disciples, his friends to know him. He wants to be known by them, and he wants them to know him. Isn't that interesting? That here is God wanting to know and be known. He wants a relationship. He wants to be together in life. He wanted his disciples to understand who he is, deep in their souls. Now, please don't miss this, because this is critical to the life of a person who wants to experience peace in times of trouble. If you want to have peace in times of trouble, the way to do that, the way to experience, we would say, eternal life, if you want to be saved, if you want to have an untroubled heart in a troubled world, the way that we do this, Jesus is saying right here, he says that it's all about knowing him. Know Jesus. Get to know him and know his Father. And he says, at this point, he says, and from this point on, you can know me. This is the moment. We just talked about it a little bit ago. Pentecost comes. We're able to know Jesus because he is hours away from the cross. He's hours away from, a couple days from the resurrection, where we get to really know Jesus and what he's about. So how do we know Jesus? He gives us a few more details here. And a lot of us in our Western world, we're thinking more Bible study, more books, more podcasts, more information. We have all kinds of information. And I love information. I think it's fun. We do all of those things. But if we just leave it here, we can become critical, angry, bitter, difficult people. Knowledge is different. If you know somebody, it's different than that. It's very personal. It's personal. You can read what's going on. You see the way they move. You can go, "Oh, this person, yeah, they're having a good mood." Or this person, I keep seeing things on, I don't know, one of the social media things. You have one kid that you don't have a favorite kid, but you have one kid you're really trying to not to make mad. Have you seen that? Well, you have one kid, you just go, "We're just going to leave him alone right now. He needs to be left alone for a little bit." Because you know that kid. So because you're personal, you're involved with them. So this idea about knowing God is a personal knowledge where I can see and understand what God is up to in these moments. And Philip, he expresses something that we all can work through. Philip says, "Jesus, Lord, show us the Father, and it is enough for us." If knowing the Father, if that's what we need to do, just show us the Father, and we'll be good. And Dale Bruner, he's a former and retired Whitworth professor, brilliant theologian. We are blessed to have some great things here in Spokane. And Dale Bruner, he translates this passage. He says basically what Philip is saying. He says, "Lord, please show us the Father, and we won't ask you for any more favors. If you show us the Father, we won't ask you for anything else. If you do this one thing for us, we'll never ask for anything again." Anybody ever had that prayer? "Get me out of this and we're done. I'll never ask for anything." That's what Philip is saying. Well, what is Philip trying to get to? Philip is asking for something that many of us desire. We seek after this. He wants a guarantee. He wants to be able to say, "I have seen the Father. This is clear. I know for sure that this is going to happen because of these situations." Philip wants a guarantee. Why? Because then he can be in control. Then he has things that he's certain of. He doesn't have to wonder about. He's looking for control. What he wants actually is a release from vulnerability. He doesn't want to be vulnerable. He wants to be vulnerability free. Let me talk about vulnerability for a few minutes to get to the heart of the situation. And I use that phrase intentionally because vulnerability really is at the heart of the situation. It's the emotional center. It's where we're able to get to the core of our emotions and feelings. Vulnerability is the place where we experience harm. We're susceptible to harm there. To feel is to be vulnerable. Let me say that again. To feel is to be vulnerable. If we want to be full of joy, we have to put ourselves where we are in a vulnerable situation. Joy brings the possibility of pain, a disappointment. There's something about joy that the possibility of the negative is possible. They're connected emotions. I know people, let me give you an example. I know people who if they're sports fans, if it's a big game, they will not watch their game until they know whether their team won or not, and then they'll go back and watch if they won. Why? It's too painful if they lose. If their team loses, the disappointment is so painful, they can't even watch. So what they do is they wait and see what happens, then they go back and watch. What's going on there? They don't want to put themselves in a situation where they're going to be hurt. They're trying to protect themselves from that. Some of you skip ahead to the end of a book so you can decide what's the outcome, so that you know going forward what's going to happen to that character, so that you don't have to have the pain and the vulnerability of experiencing what's going on in that story. Why? You don't like feeling vulnerable. You don't want to have your emotions connected to that. You want to be in control. You know what's happening. You have the certainty, the guarantee of what will happen. So you've put up barriers to keep yourself protected. That's what's happening here. And this is what Philip is asking to do. He's trying to put himself up so he's not at risk. We like to do this in relationships too. We just can't do that. We can't look back and say, what happened? How did it go? But we want certainty in relationships. We've been hurt by people, so we put up barriers in our lives so that we no longer hurt. We protect ourselves from the feeling of pain, so we're no longer vulnerable to it. But when we put up barriers to protect ourselves from pain, we also are no longer to feel joy, to feel goodness, to feel loved, because we've put up barriers that are keeping people away from us. We've put up walls to protect us, and one of those walls is certainty. If I'm certain that this will happen, I'm certain that this person can't hurt me, so we keep them a distance, and we're not able to experience the goodness of that. Let me say it like this. If we don't trust others, we will never be vulnerable. Trust is the core issue of vulnerability. If we are not willing to trust our coworkers, we will never be vulnerable with them. If we lose trust in our spouse, we will not be vulnerable with them. We will put up walls so that we don't have to feel the pain. There's a business consultant who's also a Christ follower. His name is Patrick Lencioni. He has a book called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. So basically, it's any relationship. What's the core foundation of any successful team, business, organization, family, relationship? What's the foundation you have to have above all things? He says it's trust. He says this. He says to have a successful team, you have to have trust. He says great teams admit their mistake, their weaknesses, and their concerns without reprisal. So in the middle of trust, you have to be vulnerable. You have to be able to say, I'm not great here. I'm not feeling great right now. I have some real concerns. If we're going to build trust, we have to express our vulnerability. A person who acknowledges that they are susceptible to being hurt, a person who expresses their vulnerability actually builds trust with the people around them. Isn't that interesting? If you say, boy, I'm just not feeling great, you can trust that this person is being honest and you can work with that. You know, if somebody says, no, I'm fine, meanwhile, they can barely walk, you know it's harder to trust that person because you don't know if they're sick. Vulnerability actually leads to trust. A person who acknowledges their sin or their fault genuinely and humbly actually open the door for trust. Okay, so what does trust and vulnerability have to do with anything I'm talking about over here? That's a really good question. The two actually feed into each other. So usually vulnerability comes first. You're vulnerable. You express where you have concerns, you're weak, your failures, whatever that is, wherever you have exposed to being susceptible to being hurt. You're vulnerable, that comes first, and then we begin to trust. That trust grows over time, takes effort, takes attention. It's not just an overnight type of thing, but trust builds. And then what happens is then we have a relationship. That relationship builds into knowledge. You get to know the other person. So if there's no trust, there's no vulnerability. Did I say that? That's wrong direction. No vulnerability, no trust, no relationship, no knowledge. But we have to go back to the very beginning. We have to have vulnerability to eventually get into the knowledge of a person. You with me so far? Some of us have stopped being vulnerable. We've stopped trusting others because we are unwilling to experience the type of pain we've experienced in the past. Totally understandable reasons. We've stopped trusting people. We've put up barriers. We don't want to receive that pain. Well, we've put up walls, and so now we no longer receive joy. Some of you wonder where your friends and family are. Why aren't they checking on you when you're the problem? You've gone into protection mode because you don't want to be hurt, and people can't get near you. You've drove them away from rising up in pretense or being in protection mode, and they don't want to be around you. They sense it because you put up walls to keep yourself safe. And the result is you're no longer in a good and healthy relationship with these people. Some of us actually feel better about living like that than experiencing the occasional joy and then the horrific pain. It's just easier to just live disappointed than experiencing joy and disappointment. Just the back and forth is just hard on our hearts. It causes us to be troubled. So if we return to Philip for just a moment, what he's saying is he doesn't want to be disappointed again. He doesn't want to go through that. He wants to know for certain, guarantee. I want to know so that I don't have to experience the pain. And so what happens in those moments is maybe he's found betrayal. Maybe he's been frustrated. He's been in pain. He doesn't want to go through it. And Philip has mistaken an untroubled heart with an invulnerable heart. Let me say that again. He's mistaken an untroubled heart with an invulnerable heart. And you can't do that. Invulnerability blocks knowledge. Invulnerability keeps us from knowing things and knowing people. The only way we can know something is by admitting it, admitting that we don't. Think about it like this. If you're in class, the kids who raise their hands are the most vulnerable. I was terrible at this. Because you know why I didn't want to raise my hand? I didn't want people thinking I was dumb. I didn't know what I was talking about. I didn't want people thinking negatively. So I sat there in my ignorance, not knowing. The people who are raising their hands are being vulnerable. They're saying, I would like to learn something. Those are the people who are admitting they don't know. They're the ones who are learning. They're the ones who have a vulnerable heart and exposing what's going on, and they're the ones who are growing. Meanwhile, I'm sitting over here totally lost and confused, and I just remain lost and confused. In marriage, the danger is that we retreat into our own selfish ways and desires rather than becoming concerned about the spouse. We say something like, why should I take care of my needs when they aren't even caring about mine? We get invulnerable. And so we keep our relationships at a distance. No trust, no vulnerability, no intimacy, no knowledge of the other people. This is the relational connection is broken. And all of this, just as it is in humanity's relationships, applies to our relationship with Jesus. When we don't honestly admit that we are weak, that we are fearful, that we don't trust him, we keep him at a distance. We think, his plan is not going right. I don't like the direction he's taking me. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to choose to go my own direction. We stop walking with God. We choose our own path. When there's no trust, we're no longer walking with Jesus. The relationship is broken. Many of us want these guarantees. We want certainty. That's not a relationship. What we can, though, be certain about a couple of things with God. We can be certain he is good. We can be certain that he loves us. We can be certain that he will never leave us or forsake us. We can sometimes, though, in the middle of troubled times, think, I don't know about any of the things I just said I was certain of. So I'm going to start choosing my own direction. We would rather not expose ourselves to pain. We would rather stay safe. We build walls. We keep God and people at a distance. And then we say, why can't they break through these walls I built up to protect myself? Why don't I ever hear from God even though I really try to do everything I can to avoid him? See, we live in a troubled world with an untroubled heart by tearing down those walls, by being vulnerable, by saying, Jesus, I don't have a clue what I'm doing here. God, I don't know what direction I should go. Jesus, will you help me forgive that person who really is annoying me right now? Jesus, I need to ask you for forgiveness. I've really been selfish. How do I make this right? So we tear down these walls. We expose ourselves to opportunities for pain, but also for joy and love and peace and relationship and goodness. See, there's an intimacy that occurs when we go through shared experiences with people. You tear down the wall, you start walking with them. This is called knowledge. When you start walking with people, you get to know somebody, you have knowledge with somebody, you know your friend. We have shared experiences. This is what we're talking about with Jesus. He says, you know me. You guys have good friends and family members. I'm sure there are moments in your life, because you've had hours and days and years with somebody, you guys are at a dinner table with somebody, and something happens, and you look at your spouse, you look at your friends, and you just need a little glance. And you both know exactly what you're thinking. And you know all you need is a little look. A little look is all you need. And you know, hours later, you'll be laughing with your friend. I'm just now thinking of my college roommate. He and I were in class one time, and the professor said something, and he and I are both on opposite sides of the room because he sat in the front row and I sat in the back. And I remember something happened, and he said, I just knew, don't look at Isaac, don't look at Isaac. And I'm thinking, don't look at Mike, don't look at Mike. Why? Because we've had interaction with one another. We know what's going on in those moments. That's what relationship and intimacy and knowledge is like. And that's what Jesus is inviting us to. Well, how does that happen? It's because we're vulnerable. We trust. We spend time with one another. We walk with one another. We expose our weaknesses and say, yeah, I totally messed up here. This is what Jesus is inviting us to. Walking with Jesus doesn't mean we always know the next step. It doesn't mean that we always know how we're going to get through something. It doesn't mean that when we get through something, we go, oh, that's why God had me do that. That's not what knowledge with God means. There are going to be times where you experience something awful, you look back and you go, I don't understand why I went through that at all. That's the part of uncertainty of walking with Jesus. We just don't know, but what we do is we trust. We expose ourselves. We say, God, I don't know why I went through that. I didn't really care for it then. I don't really care for it now, but I trust you. I trust you. This is the type of relationship because we know he is good. He'll never leave us. He loves us. And he invites us into this relationship with him where we give him our life and we walk with him day by day, moment by moment. And usually it's good. And there are days where we go, I don't get this at all. And we keep going. That's what knowledge, that's what relationship is like. The only way to get through this, though, is by walking through the trouble, is walking through. You can't avoid it. The only path that Jesus tells us is available to this path of life, to this being untroubled in a troubled world. The only path to do that is through him. And it's through the exposure of vulnerability, of just being honest about your situation. For example, in 1992, the Hurricane Andrew came through the southern part of Florida. And after the storm, reporters interviewed utility crews about what happened and how they were able to fix everything and get everything back running in the face of destruction. And they went through just a horrific time. And they interviewed a lineman, and the lineman said this. He said, if we spend all of our time trying to avoid the storm, the damage only gets worse. Sometimes the only way to restore power is to drive straight into the darkness, being vulnerable, going into the difficulty, exposing ourselves to possible pain, to possible damage. Our instinct is almost always avoidance, either protection, where we say avoid it by overpowering or by protecting ourselves. We avoid trouble. We avoid pain. We avoid hard conversations. We avoid forgiveness. We do this because we don't want to feel weak or exposed. We convince ourselves that going around is in the end going to be fine. But storms rarely disappear when they are ignored. Have you noticed this? Have you noticed that conversation you keep trying to not have hasn't gone away? Have you noticed the financial situation hasn't miraculously cleared itself? You have to go through the storm with Jesus at our side. A sailor once explained it this way, that there was a violent storm, and when it hits the sea, what happens is inexperienced captains, they try to outrun the storm. So the problem is with this is that they turn toward the ship towards the broadside, and so the ship is just bombarded, and it's in danger of capsizing. But experienced captains, they know that they turn the bow toward the storm, and they're able to ride the waves over the storm. Too many of us, what we do is we turn our life broadside, and we're just being bombarded by the storms. We're trying to protect ourselves, and all we're doing is instead of facing the storm, going through it with Jesus, what we're doing is we're just getting crushed. But the way to have an untroubled heart in a troubled world is to turn and face the storm, exposing yourself to it and going through it with Jesus. We would rather be comfortable and certain than vulnerable and intimate. We would rather avoid than work through the process. The only way to knowledge, though, is to go through the situation. Did you know that Jesus was vulnerable? We don't often like to think about God becoming vulnerable. This makes us uncomfortable. We don't like that. But yet Jesus arrived on earth completely dependent on his mother and Joseph. He arrived as a baby. Could Jesus have cared for himself in that moment? No. He needed somebody to come alongside, to bathe him, to change him, to feed him. He needed somebody to teach him to walk, teach him to talk, teach him to pray. Jesus came. This is called the incarnation, where God became flesh. Jesus became vulnerable. He was exposed. He lived on earth. He was available to people to hurt, to betray, to be rejected, to be denied. He would not be human if he didn't go through these experiences that we've gone through. God became vulnerable for us. Why? Why did God do this? Because he wants to know us. He wants us to know him. And the only path to do that is by being vulnerable, by exposing yourself, by being honest and saying, here I am. And that's what Jesus did. He became vulnerable to the point of death on a cross. This is what Paul says. Jesus, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself. He made himself vulnerable by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men, and being found in human form, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on the cross. Jesus was willing to be hurt physically, emotionally, mentally. He experienced that for our sake, so that we could have an untroubled heart in troubled times. He went through that so we could know him. And once we do that, we can get through. In an agitated world, he gives us peace that only he can provide. And he tells us that's possible by knowing God. He invites us to know him. So if you want to know what God looks like, we look at Jesus. And what did Jesus do? He reveals sacrifice and love and joy and vulnerability. And we're invited to know that. If you want to live in an untroubled world, if you want to live in a troubled world with an untroubled heart, the path is to know God. And this is done by trusting, exposing to him our weaknesses, our failures, offering our sins, and saying, God, I just don't know. Help me get through this. We admit we've failed and are wrong. We acknowledge our sin. Sin is not a topic we talk much about in our world. We call it mistakes. I just made a mistake. But what we have to bring that to the attention and say, God, I just messed this up. We've failed. What we've done, we've chosen another path other than God. And God, amazingly, welcomes us back in. we've chosen to forsake vulnerability for control or guarantees. And we are left feeling isolated and alone. And God says, you don't have to live like that. Come join me. I'm here for your life. So how do we practice being vulnerable this week? Well, this week, to practice being vulnerable, you have a couple of options. This week, you can acknowledge you were wrong. So this will be a first for some of you guys. Big week for some of you. You could admit, how about this? How about admitting you don't know something? I don't know if you guys experience this, but sometimes if somebody says, oh, do you know this person? Have you watched this movie? Have you read this book? Do you know this situation? You want to go, yeah, I've never heard of this person in my entire life, but I'm like, oh yeah, met him, great, we're great friends. What about that is, why? Because I don't want to be vulnerable. I don't want to be seen as unintelligent or not knowing something. So, oh yeah, I know. So this week, when somebody says, do you know this person? Say, never heard of them. Nope. Be honest about it. Be vulnerable. You know what? They're not going to say, I can't believe that. You've never heard of this person. They're not going to do it. And there's something inside of us that being vulnerable exposes and God's able to use. So practice either saying you don't know something. That might be something new for some of you. Just say, I don't know. Or say, I was wrong. That's how we're going to practice being vulnerable this week. If you just say, that's not going to happen. Well, there's another thing you do. When you're out in the community, if you see somebody who looks like they're vulnerable, the outcasts among us, remember that Jesus came, that he was vulnerable, that he was a human. And we can see in that person say, just as Jesus came and was vulnerable, he exposed himself to humanity and it cost him his life. When we see somebody that's hurting and broken, we can be reminded of what God did for us, how he exposed himself so that we can be in relationship with him. Now, I don't know where you might be this morning, feeling vulnerable. You come in, maybe you just feel like you're not good enough. You're not good enough at your job. You're not good enough parent. You're not a good enough spouse. Just the list goes on of things that we're not good enough. Or maybe you haven't done something correctly. Maybe at this point in your life you think, I feel like I should have accomplished more than I have by now. And there's just something inside of you just feel weak and exposed. I don't know where you are. Maybe you feel alone or unheard. It's in these moments that God says, come on in. You admit it and come on in. And he welcomes us to his relationship. This is how we get to know him and build trust in him. And we begin to walk with him. It's instead of saying, I got this under control, I'm going to do my own thing. When we recognize that we are broken and hurting and need help, God welcomes us in. So here's what we're going to do. Let's just take just a moment. I'll give you like 1 minute. Just think, how are you feeling? Where are you feeling vulnerable today? Tell God where you feel vulnerable right now. Just say, God, this is where I'm feeling vulnerable. He hears you and he cares about you. So we'll take just literally 1 minute, probably less. Think about where you're feeling vulnerable and tell God how you're feeling today. Just be honest with him. Jesus, some of us walk in this room feeling very vulnerable and exposed, looking at relationships or job situations or finances, and we just are kind of a mess. And we want to admit that to you right now because it's when we are weak, then you are strong. You join us, you welcome us in. So, Lord, we want to acknowledge our desperate need for you. Instead of trying to run or try to put on a brave face and say we're fine when we're really struggling, we need to be honest in these moments. Jesus, we need you today. For those who actually are really hurting, we ask that you would come and meet their need, whether it's healing or finances, direction. God, we need you. This is why you came, so that we could have an untroubled heart. We could be at rest in you, and so we need you in these moments of troubled times. Help us to know you and put our trust in you. In your name, amen. All right, so we have a couple discussion questions. When was the time you felt weak and exposed? So as you're talking in your small groups, when was the time you felt vulnerable? Now, what I'm this could get deep and painful. Use sound judgment in your small groups. We're not asking in these moments. Be wise with who you're sharing with. But at the same time, when was the time that you were weak and vulnerable, you felt exposed? What happened? Number 2, how well do you feel like you know your loved ones? How well do you feel like you know them? What's your vulnerability, your trust level, your knowledge of your loved ones? And then I'm curious too, the next one, rate that on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 meaning you don't know your spouse or children at all. 10 is, I know exactly where they're at every moment of the day. I know what they're thinking. Some of you moms are like, you got it dialed in. You moms are amazing. You know your kids. Number 3, I have 3 questions, a bonus. How well do you feel like your loved ones know you? That's what I'm really curious about, because if you don't feel like you're known well at all, how much is that because you put up barriers? How much have you tried to keep people at a distance? So those are the 3 questions. When do you feel like you've been weak and exposed? How well do you feel like you know your loved ones? How well do you feel like your loved ones know you? I'm going to give a blessing as we go. A couple things, though. We have our prayer team in the back. We'd love to pray for you. It is our joy to do so. If you have need, we're happy to do that. But otherwise, hope you have a great week. But let me give you a prayer of blessing. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Intersection, you are loved. Go in peace. Have a great week.